Welcome back. Tonight, we're stepping into a different kind of pilgrimage, not one of sightseeing or postcards, but of frost, fatigue, and faith tested by cold stone and colder nights. If you're here for gentle, boring history for sleep, you have found a quiet place to let your thoughts slow down and drift. The Crusaders are often remembered for heat, sand, and dust. Armoured men under a burning sun. But that's only half the story. The Holy Land was not just desert. It was mountains, valleys, rain, and nights that froze steel, stiffened limbs, and cracked lips. They crossed Europe believing they were marching toward glory, but many ended up learning how it feels to sleep, shivering under heaven's silence. Tonight, you'll follow them into their tents, their mud shelters, their makeshift camps by torchlight, and see how faith and exhaustion collided when warmth became a luxury and sleep a fragile truce between man and death. You'll feel the cold settle through layers of chainmail and wool, the dampness that crept into their bones, and the slow, numb ritual of surviving another night far from home. So, dim the lights. Maybe pull your blanket a little closer. And as the world outside quiets down, we'll drift together into the forgotten chill of those winter encampments, where knights, foot soldiers, and pilgrims learned the hardest kind of devotion, enduring the cold when heaven felt so far away. You open your eyes to a sound that shouldn't exist in the desert. It's the sound of wind, not the warm kind that moves sand across a dry plain, but a brittle, cutting gust that scrapes across canvas and rattles metal. The air bites, and for a moment you don't know where you are. Then you remember. You're in the camp of the army of God, somewhere between a frozen ridge and a valley that smells faintly of smoke and rot. The Holy Land isn't holy tonight. It's just cold. Your blanket is a thin scrap of wool that's been damp for 3 days. You pull it tighter around your shoulders, but it doesn't help. Nothing helps. The ground beneath you is hard and slick with frost, the kind that forms even when the fire dies too soon. Every joint aches. The leather of your boots is stiff as bone, and your breath fogs in the darkness. You can taste the smoke from last night's fire in your mouth, mixed with dust and old wine. Somewhere close by, a horse stamps its hooves against the ground, sending up a faint thud that echoes through the silence. No one told you the Holy Land would be this cold. When you left home, they spoke of a land of milk and honey, of golden sun and secret heat. You imagine palm trees, warm evenings, and skies painted red by divine light. Instead you found freezing rain, nights so black they swallow the stars, and wind that sneaks through armour and skin, until it feels like it's scraping the soul itself. The men who marched beside you believed they were going to war for God. Now they just pray for warmth. The road here was long, cruel, and always wet. From the snows of the Alps to the storms of Anatolia, the world seemed to bend itself against you. You walked through mud that sucked at your feet, over passes where horses froze standing, their eyes glazed with ice. You slept beside rivers swollen with meltwater and woke with frost on your beard. The pious said this suffering was purification, that the cold cleansed the soul of sin. But after the first 100 nights, even faith starts to feel like frostbite. You remember the first time you saw a man collapse in the snow. He'd walked too far without food. His boots split open at the seams. He fell quietly, as though sleep had simply caught him. When they tried to lift him, his limbs wouldn't bend. They buried him where he lay, covering his body with a few handfuls of snow because the ground was too hard to dig. No prayers were said. There wasn't time. The column moved on. You walked away knowing you'd probably end the same way. One more shape in the white silence behind the march. At night, the wind carried sounds that played tricks on the mind. The creak of leather, the distant clatter of armour, the low murmur of someone reciting psalms through chattering teeth. The campfires burned low, because wood was scarce, and the few flames that survived were surrounded by huddled figures who didn't speak. You learned to sit close without talking, breathing the same smoke, sharing the same misery. Conversation was a luxury, the voice wasted heat. When you finally reached the borders of the Holy Land, you expected relief. But the cold didn't end there. The winters of Palestine and Syria were cruel in their own way. Rain turned the earth to sludge, nights dropped below freezing, and the damp crept through armour faster than any arrow. The tents the army brought were never enough. Most men built crude shelters from torn canvas, broken shields, and animal hides. Some slept in ditches lined with straw, others under overturned wagons. You envied the ones who had fur cloaks, though even those froze stiff by morning. Inside the tent, the smell was a mix of unwashed wool, sweat, wet leather, and smoke. The ground was a paste of mud and ashes. When you lay down, the cold from the earth seeped through your blanket and into your spine. You tried to sleep, but your body wouldn't stop trembling. Sometimes you woke up with your fingers locked into claws, unable to open them until you breathed on them for minutes at a time. The pain of thawing was worse than the cold itself, but it meant you were still alive. The men who stopped shivering never woke up again. When the wind cut through the camp, it carried more than cold. It brought the smell of fear. Soldiers muttered prayers to saints, rubbed wooden crosses between numb fingers, whispered home to wives they would never see again. You heard a man cry out for his mother one night before silence took him. By morning, they found him under his blanket, still sitting upright, his eyes open. They said he died peacefully, but the truth is, no one dies peacefully in this kind of cold. They just stop fighting. You start to understand that survival isn't about strength here. It's about small decisions. Who you sleep beside, how tightly you wrap your cloak, how long you let the fire burn before rationing the wood. You learn to eat even when you're not hungry, because warmth depends on food. You learn to never take off your boots, even when they're soaked through, because they'll freeze solid before dawn. You learn that faith doesn't feel like fire. It feels like numbness. The first time you saw Jerusalem in the distance, it didn't look like salvation. It looked like smoke rising from a distant battlefield. The men around you fell to their knees, weeping, but the wind was too cold to feel anything but fatigue. The journey had burned away everything except the instinct to keep walking. Even holiness couldn't compete with exhaustion. You still remember the sound of frozen mail shifting on your chest when you knelt in prayer. The armour never warmed, not even under the midday sun. It rubbed your skin raw until blisters turned to sores, and the sores froze into pale scabs that cracked open whenever you moved. You learned to ignore the pain because there was no choice. The body belonged to the weather now. In the evenings, when the fires burned low, stories spread through the camp like smoke. Some said the cold was God's test. Others said it was punishment. One priest claimed the devil himself lived in the wind that swept down from the mountains, freezing the hearts of men. but the older soldiers just laughed. They'd seen too many winters to believe in demons made of air. They said the only devils were hunger, fatigue, and the human need to believe there was meaning in suffering. You didn't argue. You just listened and tried to keep your hands from shaking. The road south from Antioch was a graveyard of bones and broken carts. The snow turned grey with ash from burned-out villages. The bodies of men and horses lay half-buried, frozen stiff like warnings to those still breathing. At night, when the fires flickered, you could see the shapes of the dead under the frost, outlines of armour glinting faintly in the moonlight. No one spoke about them. You just stepped over them and tried to forget that each one had once believed, just like you, that they were marching toward paradise. There was no paradise. Just another hill, another valley, another night of sleepless cold. When it rained, you covered your head with your shield. When it froze, you pressed yourself between others for warmth, armour clinking in the dark. You could feel hearts beating beneath the layers of mail and leather, slow and tired but still alive. That was the closest thing to comfort you had. The hardest part wasn't the pain, it was the silence. The kind that settled over the camps once the last murmurs of prayer faded, and all you could hear was the creaking of the tents and the moaning of the wind. In that silence, thoughts wandered home. You saw faces in the dark, your wife, your children, your village, and for a moment the cold felt like their absence made solid. That was when despair crept in. Not loud or sudden, but quiet and heavy, like a blanket you couldn't throw off. You stopped counting the days. You stopped marking the distance. Every morning felt like the same grey dawn. Every night the same black freeze. Even the stars began to blur together. Faith no longer came from words or sermons. It came from endurance. From refusing to die in your sleep. From waking up again and again in a world that seemed determined to bury you under its cold. And when you finally reached the valley where the next camp would be built, the frost followed you. The men around you didn't cheer or pray. They just set down their packs, scraped a patch of earth clear with their boots, and began collecting whatever scraps of wood they could find. You joined them because that's what you did now. You gathered, built, burned, and waited. The cold had become a companion, not an enemy. It was something you learned to live beside, like hunger or guilt. Somewhere out in the darkness a trumpet sounded, the signal for the next watch. The fire sputtered low. You pulled your cloak tighter, your fingers trembling as you held them to the last red coals. The smoke rose in slow spirals, carrying with it the faint scent of ash and oil. The stars above were sharp as blades, cutting through the night sky. You stared at them until your eyes blurred, wondering if heaven could see this frozen world below, or if it had turned its gaze somewhere warmer. You didn't have an answer. You just breathed, slow and shallow, until your body began to loosen. The cold was still there, but it no longer frightened you. It was part of you now, woven into the skin, the armour, the air. The frost on your face melted with each breath, only to return again as soon as you exhaled. Around you, the camp settled into uneasy sleep. Men murmured prayers that turned to mist, then to silence. You lay back, staring into the dark, and for the first time in days, you almost felt still. The wind eased for a moment. The fire cracked once, then went quiet. The world narrowed to the slow rhythm of breath, and the faint rustle of cloaks against frozen ground. The night was far from over, but it didn't matter anymore. You'd made it through one more march, one more frost, one more hour of endurance. The road ahead was long, but so was the faith that kept you walking. And as the horizon began to fade into a pale shimmer of dawn, the cold returned, softer now, quieter, like the memory of something you'd once feared and now simply carried. The journey hadn't ended. It had only changed shape, and the frost that once punished you had become the silence that held everything together. The ground is your bed now, hard, uneven, cold enough to make your bones hum. You've stopped trying to make it comfortable. There's no soft patch of earth, no grass, just a mixture of gravel, old ashes, and what's left of trampled straw. You clear it with your hands anyway, pushing the stones aside, telling yourself it makes a difference even when it doesn't. The dirt clings to your skin, works its way beneath your fingernails, and stays there because washing isn't an option. You spread your thin blanket, drop your shield beside you, and lower yourself down inch by inch, the weight of the day pressing every joint into the ground like a blacksmith's hammer. The first breath that leaves your mouth fogs up instantly. The second one sticks to your beard. You pull your cloak tighter, but it's damp again from the night before. The wool smells faintly of smoke and mould. You've learned to stop noticing. Everything smells the same now. Iron, sweat, wet leather, and the faint, sour trace of unwashed bodies. Around you the camp murmurs like a dying animal. Men shifting, coughing, groaning. Someone nearby mutters a prayer half asleep, words slurred together with exhaustion. Another man is whispering a psalm, his voice shaking as he tries to finish before the cold makes his teeth chatter, too loud to form the syllables. Sleep isn't rest here. It's a negotiation. The ground wins most nights. You lie down, close your eyes, and wait for the tremors in your muscles to fade. They never fully do. The cold seeps in from beneath and above, pressing down until your body feels like it's being flattened into the earth. You curl into yourself, knees tucked close, trying to conserve heat, but the air slides into every gap. Your hands, wrapped inside your cloak, start to go numb. It's a strange kind of pain, one that burns at first and then dulls into something worse. Absence. You can hear armour shifting as someone beside you turns over. The sound is slow, metallic, like a door hinge on the edge of breaking. You used to take off your armour before lying down. You don't anymore. Too many stories of men caught unready when raiders attacked at dawn. Better to freeze in iron than die without it. So you sleep half inside your breastplate, sword within reach, shield by your leg. The cold metal steals the warmth from your chest, but the fear of being unarmed is colder. The sky above is a lid of dark clouds, thick enough to hide the stars. The fires are few and far between now, just faint orange dots scattered across the plain. They burn low because wood is scarce, each one guarded by men who ration the embers like treasure. You stare at one of them until your eyes sting, memorizing the shape of it, trying to draw some illusion of warmth from the sight alone. You can almost hear the hiss of wet branches in the coals. The smell drifts on the wind. Wood smoke, wet wool, cooked meat from a pot somewhere. It should be comforting. Instead, it only reminds you how far you are from home, from any bed that doesn't fight back when you lie down. You shift again, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt. Your back screams from the day's march. The straps from your armour have carved lines into your shoulders. You can feel each muscle pulsing, sore and stretched. The ache has become familiar, a kind of heartbeat that won't stop. You breathe through it and focus on small things. The sound of your breath, The rhythm of boots scuffing somewhere nearby. The whisper of the wind against the tent cloth. You tell yourself that these are ordinary sounds, safe sounds, not the noises of an army half frozen and waiting for dawn. Every few minutes, a voice cuts through the dark. A sentry calling out a password. Another answering from a distance. You listen for it without meaning to, counting the intervals between them. The repetition helps. It's proof that someone is still awake, still alive, still watching. You drift between wakefulness and half sleep, your mind filled with fragments of home. A fire, a doorway, a bed that doesn't creak like old leather. But memory doesn't warm you. It just stings, like touching something hot and then realizing it's gone. Someone coughs violently a few paces away. The sound echoes, then fades. You recognize the voice. It's one of the younger soldiers, barely more than a boy, who joined near Antioch. He's been coughing for days, the wet, rattling kind that shakes the ribs. The priest said it was a chill. The older men say it's something worse. You think of the last two, who sounded like that and never woke up. You tighten your cloak, as if fabric could protect you from disease. It can't, but habit gives the illusion of control. Your stomach growls. You ate hours ago, if it could be called eating, a piece of bread so hard it could hammer nails, soaked in a thin broth of barley and salt. The hunger never leaves, only settles into a dull background ache. You've stopped dreaming of feasts. You dream of crumbs now, and of the warmth that food brings. You close your eyes and think of a roasted meat, of bread still soft from an oven, of wine that doesn't taste like vinegar. For a moment, your mind forgets the cold. Then the wind shifts, and the illusion breaks. You roll onto your side and pull your knees tighter. The movement sends a jolt of pain through your hip. Beneath the blanket, the ground feels alive with chill. You can feel the moisture seeping through the cloth, creeping up your spine. You whisper a small curse under your breath and reach for the edge of your cloak to fold it again. The leather of your glove is stiff, fingers barely able to grip. You fumble, manage to tuck the edges tighter, and try to still your breathing. It works for a few moments, and then the shivering starts again. The man beside you mutters something in Latin, a half-formed prayer. You join him quietly, your voice barely a breath. You don't know if you believe it anymore, but it feels wrong not to say the words. They fall into the air like frost, vanish before they reach anyone who might be listening. You say them anyway, because when everything else is cold and uncertain, ritual is the only thing left that feels solid. The ground moves faintly under you. You realise it's the horses shifting in the distance. Their hooves thud against the frozen dirt, tails swishing weakly. They're covered in blankets made of patchwork hides, eyes glinting in the firelight. Some of the men sleep close to them, using the animals' warmth like living walls. You did that once. The smell was unbearable, but it worked. The heat of a horse's body can save a man's life. Now the space near the animals is taken by the higher-ranking soldiers. You're left to the open air. You don't blame them. Rank earns warmth. Faith earns patience. There's a faint sound of singing somewhere near the centre of camp. A slow, low chant. Maybe a priest, maybe just someone trying to keep the dark away. The melody drifts over the tents and dies before it reaches you. You wish it wouldn't stop. Even bad singing is better than silence. The quiet makes the cold seem louder. You rub your hands together again. The motion hurts, skin cracking along the knuckles. You can see where the nails have turned black at the edges. The dirt is ground into every line of your palms. You remember washing them once in a stream near Nicaea when the water was warm and clear. You remember thinking it was a good omen. It wasn't. You've learned not to look for omens anymore. They're as unreliable as firewood in the rain. The blanket shifts slightly as a gust of wind slips under it. You grip the edges tighter and hold your breath until it passes. The tent above you creaks. You imagine the ropes snapping, the canvas tearing loose and flying into the dark. It wouldn't matter much. The air inside isn't any warmer than outside. You glance toward the entrance, where a thin line of moonlight cuts across the dirt. The ground there is marked with footprints, frozen solid. You trace them with your eyes until they fade into shadow. Somewhere out beyond the camp, a wolf howls. The horses stir again. The sound feels both distant and near, a reminder that the wilderness doesn't care who claims the land in the name of God. The cold doesn't care either. It takes everyone the same way. Slow, patient, inevitable. You think of the men who went missing 2 nights ago, caught in the dark when they strayed from the fires. They'll be found when the thaw comes. Maybe not even then. The earth keeps what it takes. You roll onto your back and stare at the roof of the tent. The fabric flutters gently. A small hole has opened near the top, and you can see a faint glimmer of light through it. Maybe a star. Maybe just a reflection of a fire somewhere else. You fix your eyes on it until they start to sting. Your heartbeat slows a little. The ache in your legs dulls. You breathe in through your nose and taste dust. You breathe out, watching the air cloud above your face. Sleep finally begins to edge in. The kind that doesn't feel restful, just heavy. Your body shuts down parts of itself to save heat. You drift without realizing it, sinking into the weight of exhaustion. The sounds of the camp fade, the coughs, the clinks, the muttering prayers, until all that's left is the faint rush of wind. In that half-dream state, you see the outlines of home again, the doorway with the iron latch, the bed of straw, the fire that never had to be shared. Then you see it fade, replaced by the tent walls and the constant hum of cold. The vision never lasts long. The fire outside cracks once, loud enough to wake a few men. You blink your eyes open, not sure how much time has passed. The air hasn't changed. Still biting, still damp, still merciless. Someone near the fire throws another stick on it. Sparks leap upward and drift into the sky before vanishing. You watch them rise until your eyes close again. The ground beneath you groans softly as the frost deepens. The night doesn't end. It just changes temperature. Somewhere in the dark, the horizon shifts colour, and a faint line of grey appears. You don't move. You stay curled, waiting for someone else to stir first. The frost on your blanket sparkles faintly in the dim light. Every breath feels like a weight pressing against your chest. You know you'll have to get up soon. The orders will come, the camp will stir, the fires will die down again before they can truly warm anyone. You blink slowly, trying to gather enough will to move. The cold has made your body its own kind of armour, stiff and unyielding. You push your hand out from under the cloak. The air bites instantly, sharp as a knife. You grip your sword hilt, not because there's danger, but because it's familiar. The leather feels like a part of you now, cracked and worn, moulded to your palm. You take one long breath and let it out. The sky above lightens just enough to see the outlines of the camp, the rows of tents, the faint curls of smoke, the figures beginning to stir. Another night survived. No one celebrates. There's no victory in it, only continuation. You sit up slowly, brushing frost from your beard, and stare at the dirt floor where you slept. It's marked with the shape of your body. You think about saying a prayer, but the words won't come. You've said enough. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and stand. Your knees pop like breaking twigs. The ground crunches under your boots. You look toward the east, where the light is spreading thin across the hills, and for a brief moment the air feels almost still. You take one step forward, then another, leaving the shape of your sleep behind. The cold follows, quiet and faithful as ever. The cloak is everything now. It's your wall, your roof, your blanket, your disguise against the wind. You wear it in sleep, in prayer, in battle, and sometimes even in silence, when you're trying not to think about anything at all. It's a thick thing of wool, heavy, scratchy, stained by rain and grease and smoke. Once, when it was new, it had colour, deep brown, maybe even red. Now it's just the colour of the earth, blended into the landscape like it belongs there. The edges are stiff with salt from dried sweat. The inside smells faintly of animal fat from the oil you rub into it to keep out the damp. It doesn't work. The cold still seeps through, patient and certain. When you wrap yourself in it, the first sensation is always the same, a momentary comfort followed by a creeping chill. The wool traps your body heat for a few breaths, but soon it's saturated. The damp inside it becomes your second skin. You've stopped taking it off, even when you eat or pray. Taking it off feels dangerous, like shedding protection you can't replace. Some of the men joke that their cloaks have fused with their armour. The truth isn't far from that. The fabric rubs against the metal and grows shiny where it touches the plates. Beneath it, your clothes are a patchwork of repairs, sewn over and over with thread that doesn't match, stretched so thin you can feel the air through the weave. Quilts, if they exist, are treasures. They're not soft or delicate. They're coarse blankets stitched from scraps of linen or bits of old tunics, padded with straw or rags. A few knights have them, gifts from home, carried all the way across the sea and patched a dozen times since. You've seen one up close once. The stitching was crooked, the pattern faded, but it had warmth in it that no new cloth ever will. The man who owned it guarded it like a relic. He folded it carefully each morning, tied it with leather cords, and never let it touch the ground. One night, it was stolen. The next day, he searched every tent, shouting, threatening, begging. He never found it. The thief probably froze less that night, and the knight learned the last lesson every crusader eventually does. Nothing warm stays yours for long. When the wind comes down from the mountains, the cold feels like a living thing. It moves with intent. It finds the cracks in your cloak, the gaps in your gloves, the seam at your neck, where the mail meets your skin. You pull the hood tighter around your head, but the wool scrapes your cheek and leaves it raw. The men who still have furs wrap them twice around their shoulders, smelling of goat and smoke. You can see the envy in every glance. A scrap of fur is worth more than a coin now. At night, the camp looks like a collection of moving mounds. Cloaks draped over bodies, faces hidden, the whole army turned into shapes of cloth and frost. You can't tell one man from another, The ground beneath them is frozen solid, and the cloaks stiffen as they sleep. In the morning, they crack when you try to fold them. You have to beat them against your knee to make them pliable again. Sometimes the frost sticks to the inside so thick that the wool sparkles in the dim light like it's made of glass. beautiful for a second. Then your fingers go numb, and the illusion ends. The myth of warmth travels faster than truth. Men tell stories around dying fires about the cities ahead, about how the air will be warmer once they reach them. They speak of beds in monasteries, of rooms with real walls, of hearths that never go out. You listen but don't join in. You've been on this march long enough to know that warmth isn't a destination. It's a memory. Something that lives in the body for a moment, then fades, leaving behind a hollow craving that nothing ever fills. During the day, you wear your cloak while marching. The weight of it pulls at your shoulders, but without it, the wind would cut your skin open. The wool sticks to your neck when you sweat, then hardens when it cools. Every mile adds another layer of grime. When it rains, it becomes a wet burden that drags you down. You keep it anyway. Everyone does. A man without a cloak in this army doesn't last long. You've seen them. The ones who lose theirs to fire, or theft, or sheer exhaustion. They huddle close to the fires at night, hands out, eyes wild, begging for the smallest scrap of cloth. Some make it a few days like that. Most don't. Inside the tent, your cloak doubles as a blanket. You spread it over your body, tucking it beneath your legs to keep it from slipping. It smells of smoke and sweat, and when you move, it releases a faint cloud of dust. You tell yourself it's warmth, that the heaviness pressing on you is comfort, but it's just the weight of survival. You pull it tighter and try not to think of how thin the fabric has become. The officers have thicker cloaks, lined with fur or quilted with extra padding. Some of them even carry separate blankets rolled behind their saddles. You see them at night, sitting near the fires with steam rising from their cups, their cloaks glowing red in the firelight. They talk softly, laugh sometimes, though even their laughter sounds tired now. You try not to resent them. They bleed the same as everyone else, but they bleed a little warmer. You remember the first cloak you ever owned, back home, before this march began. It was simple but clean, woven by your mother from wool she'd spun herself. You wore it when you first joined the pilgrimage, proud, believing it was a holy journey. That cloak is long gone, lost to the rain somewhere in the mountains. You didn't even notice when it slipped away from your pack. By then you were already too cold to care. The one you wear now belonged to a dead man. You found it near a river, half buried in the mud. It smelled so bad you nearly left it. You didn't. You cleaned it as best you could, scraped off the worst of the filth, and called it your own. It still carries a faint, sour scent no washing could remove. You've stopped noticing. The campfire tonight is weak, barely a flicker of orange in a bowl of ash. The men sit in a circle around it, hoods drawn, hands stretched forward. The flames reach up but give off little heat. You feel the glow on your face but not the warmth. Someone tosses in a scrap of wood, maybe part of a broken shield, and the fire crackles to life for a few moments before dying again. The smoke stings your eyes. You turn your face away, pull your cloak higher, and try to hide from the wind that snakes through the tent openings. When the nights grow too cold for even the fires to help, men start to double up, lying side by side beneath shared cloaks. No one talks about it. It's just what you do when you want to wake up breathing. The body heat helps, but the smell is unbearable. Sweat, damp cloth, the sourness of fear. You breathe through your mouth and focus on the rhythm of the other man's breathing, counting it until sleep comes. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night with your arm numb and frozen. You move it carefully, afraid it might snap. Then you roll closer again, because even pain is better than the cold. There are moments, rare ones, when you almost forget it all. When the fire burns brighter than usual, or when the wind pauses for a breath and the stars come out. On those nights, you let yourself believe that warmth might be returning, that maybe this long march through the cold isn't endless. But it always is. The stars fade, the wind stirs again, and the frost creeps back into the edges of your cloak. In the mornings, when you rise, your cloak crackles as you move. The frost on it breaks like thin glass. You shake it off and brush away the ice, but your fingers are too stiff to fold it properly. You throw it around your shoulders and fasten it with a strip of cord. The air hits your face like a slap. You glance at the horizon and see the faint outline of the hills where you'll be walking again soon. The thought of moving feels impossible, but staying still is worse. The body has to move or it will stiffen beyond repair. You think of the priests, the way they tell you this suffering is divine, that the cold is a form of purification. You want to believe it, but belief doesn't keep the frost from your lungs. It doesn't stop your skin from splitting at the knuckles, or the pain from settling deep in your chest when you breathe. You look down at your cloak again, at the stains and tears, and wonder how much of it is yours anymore. The dirt has become part of the weave, the cold part of the thread. When the sun finally rises, its light doesn't bring warmth. It just makes the frost visible, glittering on helmets, on saddles, on the tips of spears. The men stand slowly, moving like old statues coming to life. Cloaks fall from shoulders, heavy and stiff, and are wrapped tight again for the march. You do the same, tying yours at the neck, pulling the hood low. It's not comfort, it's armour of a different kind. As you walk, the fabric brushes against your legs, whispering with each step. The sound is steady, familiar, almost soothing. You follow it, listening to the rhythm, the endless shuffle of boots and cloaks through frozen dirt. The air burns your throat, but you keep moving. The weight on your shoulders feels like it might pull you backward, but you keep going. The cloak moves with you, like an old companion who doesn't speak, but never leaves. By midday, the wind shifts again, colder than before. You reach up to adjust the hood, the same motion you've done 1,000 times. Your fingers tremble. You grip the edge of the wall and pull it tighter. The sky above is colourless, a pale wash of light that gives nothing. You breathe through your scarf, watching it frost over with each exhale. There's a rhythm to it now, a pattern your body knows. You march, you breathe, you wrap yourself in the same cloak and pretend it's enough. And somehow, it is. Not because it works, but because there's nothing else. The myth of warmth isn't a lie you tell yourself to feel better. It's a necessity. It's what keeps your hands moving, your heart beating, your faith from breaking entirely. The cloak doesn't save you, but it lets you imagine you're not dying yet. You hold on to that small deception like it's holy, because in the world you're trapped in, mud, frost and iron, belief is the only thing that still makes heat. Fire is a promise no one can keep out here. Every night begins with the same ritual, men gathering scraps of wood, dry grass, bits of broken wagon spokes, anything that will burn. The first spark always feels like salvation. Someone crouches low, blowing through chapped lips until the smoke turns to light. For a few brief moments, there's a glow that pulls everyone closer. The faces around it are hollowed by fatigue, but softened by that fragile orange warmth. You hold your hands to it, fingers stiff, palms open, and you can almost remember what comfort feels like. Almost. But the fire never lasts. It never does. The wood is too damp, the wind too sharp, the night too long. The flames eat through the kindling quickly, shrinking into coals that pulse weakly before fading. Every man watches it die, pretending he's not. The light fades from the faces first, then from the hands, and then from the eyes. The darkness always wins back its ground, slow and patient. You've learned the small tricks, burying the coals under ash, covering them with a flat stone to trap the heat. Sometimes it works for an hour. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night and the rock is ice cold. There's no pattern, just luck. The wood you burn gives off more smoke than heat, stinging your eyes, soaking your cloak with the smell of resin and decay. You take what you can get. The smoke drives off the insects and the wolves, if not the cold itself. In the daylight, men roam through the countryside searching for fuel. Trees are rare this far out. What little grows here is twisted, thin, and already stripped bare by the army ahead of you. You pick through ruins for beams, pry planks from abandoned carts, dig half-burned sticks out of old fire pits. Some use dried dung from the horses. It burns fast, smells terrible, but gives a brief flare that can warm a pot of water. You tell yourself that any warmth, no matter how foul, is worth it. The cold has lowered the standard of what counts as a miracle. When the sun sets, the fires start again, dotting the camp like fallen stars. Each one has its own small circle of life. Men cooking, talking, arguing quietly. You sit close to yours, knees drawn up, watching the flames lick at a blackened pot. Inside there's water, a few handfuls of barley, maybe a scrap of salted meat if fortune smiled that day. The steam fogs your face, mixes with the smoke, and makes your eyes water. You lean closer anyway. You'd rather weep from heat than from cold. Someone passes around a wooden cup of wine, thin and sour. The taste is harsh, but it spreads warmth for a few moments down your throat. You hold it there, savouring the illusion, then hand the cup to the next man. The firelight flickers over his chainmail, turning it red like molten metal. For an instant, the whole scene could almost be mistaken for something holy. Men gathered in the glow, quiet, steady, waiting for morning. Then the wind shifts, scattering the sparks into the dark, and the illusion breaks again. The fires are never big enough. Too much light draws attention. Too much smoke wastes the wood. The officers order restraint, so you huddle over small ones, half buried in pits, the flames hidden behind mounds of dirt. It's enough to cook with, not enough to chase the chill away. You extend your hands toward it, turning them slowly, palms then backs, until the skin tingles. The heat bites, then fades the moment you pull back. You do it again. The rhythm becomes a kind of prayer. Hands out, warmth, retreat, repeat. When the wind is strong, the smoke blows sideways and into your face. You squint, cough, and turn your head, but there's nowhere to hide from it. It seeps into everything. Your hair, your blanket, the fabric of your cloak. Days later, even after the fire is gone, the smell lingers. It clings to you like another layer of armour. Some men say it's the scent of safety. Others call it the smell of despair. You think it's both. The embers glow deep red by midnight. You watch them closely, reading their slow dimming like a clock. The sparks wink out one by one, leaving only a faint shimmer. You know you should add more wood, but there's none left. You nudge one of the thicker sticks closer with your boot, hoping it will catch. It doesn't. You lean forward and blow gently, your breath visible in the cold air. The ashes stir, flare weakly, then settle. The glow brightens for a heartbeat, and your face warms just enough to make your eyes close. When you open them again, the light is gone. Around you, the camp is sinking into silence. The crackling of distant fires fades, replaced by the sound of the wind moving through the tents. You can hear it tugging at the canvas, whistling through seams, brushing against the metal edges of helmets left outside. The horses snort and shift. A few coughs rise here and there. Then even that fades, until all that's left is the faint hiss of dying coals and the distant rhythm of someone's slow breathing. You remember what it was like back home, sitting by a hearth that never went out. The fire there wasn't a struggle. It was simply part of life. Steady, predictable. You could fall asleep beside it without fear. It would vanish. Here the fire feels like something alive that you have to beg to stay. You feed it scraps, you whisper at it, you guard it like a child, and still it dies before dawn. It's a teacher of sorts, cruel and consistent. Every night it reminds you that nothing lasts. Sometimes, when the wind drops, the cold becomes still instead of sharp. That's when you notice how empty the camp really sounds. The lack of crackling, the absence of flame, makes the night feel hollow. You can hear your own heartbeat. The silence presses down heavier than the dark itself. You pull your cloak tighter and stare into the ashes, hoping for one last ember. The faint orange pulse you find there becomes the centre of your world for a few minutes. You watch it flicker until your eyes blur and your head grows heavy. There are men who talk in their sleep, whispering orders or prayers. You hear your own name sometimes and don't know if it's real. The heat from the last coals barely reaches your knees. You move closer anyway, crouching low, hands flat against the dirt, trying to draw out the last warmth from below. The ground gives nothing back. You stay there until the dizziness sets in, and then sit again, wrapping your cloak around your legs. At some point, you start to dream without meaning to. The images come half awake. Flashes of red firelight, faces bent over a hearth, the sound of laughter from a long time ago. You open your eyes and find nothing but blackness. The air tastes of ash. The fire is gone. Morning always comes before you're ready. There's no colour in the dawn, just grey light creeping through the mist. The first thing you notice is the smell. The cold ashes, damp earth, and smoke that never leaves your clothes. You touch the remains of the fire, hoping for a spark, but the coals crumble beneath your fingers. You wipe the soot on your cloak and stand, joints aching. Around you, the same ritual is repeating in 100 small circles. Men stirring, stamping their feet, poking at ashes that look just like yours. The fires died for all of them, as they always do. Someone nearby curses softly. Another laughs without humour. The air is filled with that tired sound of people who expected nothing better and got exactly that. You gather what's left, the charred ends of sticks, the half-burned bone from last night's meal, and set them aside for tonight. They'll smoke, not burn, but it's something. You kick dirt over the pit and sling your pack over your shoulder. The warmth is gone now, entirely. As the column begins to form for the day's march, smoke still hangs low over the camp, twisting through the cold air. It rises slowly, catches in your throat, and lingers there like a memory you can't clear. You glance back once more at the place where your fire was. The ground is black, still warm enough to steam faintly. You could swear you see a single ember glowing, but it's just the light playing tricks through the haze. You turn away, following the line of men trudging forward through the frost. Behind you, the ashes settle, silent, waiting for night to come again, and for someone weary and desperate to try once more to keep a flame alive that was never meant to last. The armour is both your protection and your punishment. You wake up inside it most mornings, not because it's comfortable, but because taking it off has become a risk. The cold makes the metal bite against your skin. It clings hard and merciless, and when you move, it creaks like the hull of an old ship. You've stopped noticing the bruises it leaves behind. The edges press into your shoulders, your ribs, your hips. You've worn it so long that your body has begun to shape itself around the discomfort. You remember the first time you put it on. Back home, it gleamed. You polished it with sand and oil, proud of its weight, proud of the way it made you look invincible. Now it's dull, stained, streaked with rust where the rain seeped through the seams. The straps are stiff, the buckles corroded. You can smell the metal before you even touch it, a mix of sweat, iron and rot. Every joint is lined with mud, every plate cold to the touch. When you lay it beside you at night, it freezes before dawn. When you lift it again, the frost cracks and flakes off like old paint. You wear layers beneath it, a tunic, a padded gambeson, sometimes an extra cloth wrap if you can spare one. They're supposed to keep the armour from rubbing your skin raw. It doesn't help much. The padding is always damp, soaked with sweat by day, with frost by night. Once it freezes, it becomes like stone. You've seen men try to pull their gambesons off and tear them apart at the seams because the fabric was stuck to their skin. They curse through clenched teeth, ripping cloth, leaving patches of flesh behind. The cold makes it so the blood doesn't even flow right away. It just sits there, dark and sluggish, until the air thaws it. The metal never really warms. You can march for hours, climb hills, fight skirmishes, and still the breastplate will feel like you're carrying winter itself on your chest. The cold sinks into it and never leaves. At night, when you crouch near a fire, you hold your hands out toward the flames, trying to heat the armour through your body. It works for a moment, maybe two. Then the wind shifts, and the chill creeps back in, heavier than before. When it rains, it's worse. The water seeps through every gap, running down your arms, collecting at the elbows, soaking into the cloth beneath. It drips through the rings of the mail, fills the cracks around the rivets, turns every piece of metal into a miniature reservoir of cold. When you move, it squelches faintly under the plates. The sound is disgusting, like walking with a skin full of water. When night falls, the moisture turns to frost. You can feel the mail stiffen against your arms, the plates tighten around your chest. Every breath hurts. You try to stretch, but the armour resists. You can hear it crackle faintly when you bend. The worst part comes in the morning. After a night of frost, the armour doesn't bend at all. The straps freeze solid, the buckles lock, and the joints refuse to move. You wake to find your arms trapped halfway bent, your legs barely able to straighten. You pound the plates with your fists to break the ice, wincing with every hit. It sounds like someone hammering on a coffin. The frost falls in white flakes onto the dirt, and beneath it you see your breath fogging, rising into the still air. Some men sleep with their armour still on. They say it's safer that way. No surprise attacks, No fumbling in the dark trying to buckle it on, but the ones who do often wake screaming. The cold fuses the metal to their skin where the padding has worn thin. When they move, the flesh tears. You've seen the aftermath. Red streaks on linen, patches of skin peeled away like bark. The priests call it discipline. You call it what it is. Survival at any cost. The smell inside your armour is its own kind of misery. Sweat that never dries, blood that never quite washes out, mould from damp cloth that never sees sunlight. You can taste it in the back of your throat sometimes, sharp and sour. When you take off the helmet, the air hits you like a slap, cold but clean, and for a few seconds you almost feel human again. Then you put it back on, because there's no choice. The helmet is the worst of all. The metal sits close to your head, trapping your breath, your sweat, your heat. It fogs the inside until you can barely see. When the wind blows, it whistles through the gaps like a ghostly voice. You've learned to live with that sound. It's easier than silence. The rim digs into your forehead. The strap under your chin rubs raw until the skin bleeds. You pad it with cloth, but the cloth just turns stiff with frost. By the end of the day, it's like wearing a block of iron frozen to your skull. The younger men still polish their armour, still try to keep it shining. You don't bother anymore. Shine doesn't help against the cold. You've learned that dull metal works the same as bright. The rust eats everything eventually. Even the strongest plates crumble under the weather. You saw a knight's cuirass split once when he bent to pick up his sword. The frost had made it brittle. It broke with a sound like snapping bone. You dream of taking it all off one day. Not for warmth, not even for rest. Just to feel what it's like to move without weight. You imagine your body light again, unburdened, able to breathe without hearing the faint echo of metal against metal. You tell yourself it'll happen when the war ends, when the pilgrimage is over. But deep down, you know better. The armour isn't just on you anymore. It's in you. It's how you've learned to exist. Every ache, every scar, every stiffened limb is another piece of it. The officers tell you to thank God for the armour. They say it's what separates you from the dead. You believe them because it's true. But when you look around at night and see men sitting motionless, encased in metal that glints dully in the firelight, you wonder if maybe you're all halfway dead already. The armour preserves you in one way and kills you in another. It keeps your heart beating, but drains everything else. When you march in the mornings, the sound of it fills the air. 1,000 men moving in unison, their armour groaning, rattling, scraping. It's a sound that drowns out thought. You move because they move. You stop because they stop. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Metal against metal, boots against stone, breath against frost. It's not music. It's survival measured in sound. By midday, the sun climbs high enough to thaw the surface frost. Steam rises off the soldiers like smoke from a forge. The smell is unbearable. Men cough, wipe their faces, and curse. The armour grows slick again with sweat. For a few hours it almost feels warm. You'd think it would be a relief, but it's not. The sudden heat makes your skin itch. Your wounds sting. You can feel the salt of old sweat soaking into fresh cuts. You long for the cold again, even as it hides just beyond the horizon. When night returns, you take off the outer pieces, the pauldrons, the greaves, the helmet, and lay them beside you. The frost forms on them before you even finish your meal. You can see your reflection faintly at the surface, distorted and pale. You don't recognise it. You look older than you remember. though the days haven't changed in any way you can count. You reach out and wipe the condensation from the metal, but your glove leaves a smear of dirt. You give up and turn away. The mail shirt clings to you like a second skin. It moves when you breathe, but not easily. The rings pinch the cloth beneath, twist the fabric into small knots that press into your ribs. When you finally lie down, the metal pulls at your shoulders, the weight pressing down on your lungs. You close your eyes and try to imagine warmth, softness, anything that isn't iron and frost. The fantasy lasts maybe a minute. Then the shivering starts again, and reality returns like a slow hammer. You think sometimes about the men who don't wear armour, the servants, the cooks, the scouts. They're cold too, but at least their skin is their own. They move freely, their bodies light. You envy them for that, even knowing they die faster when the fighting starts. You wonder which is worse, to freeze slowly inside protection, or to die quickly without it. It's the kind of question no one answers aloud. Everyone already knows the answer that matters most. You endure because you have to. When the dawn finally comes, the armour feels heavier than ever. You sit up, joints cracking, and start fastening the pieces again. The buckles are stiff. Your fingers barely move. You blow on them to soften the leather, but the breath just fogs and freezes. It takes minutes to get everything in place. By the time you're done, your hands are numb, but you can feel the metal settle around you like a shell. You test your grip on your sword, just to make sure the fingers still obey. Then you stand. The armour shifts with you, grinding softly, cold and solid. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the air has already begun to bite. You roll your shoulders, take a deep breath, and step into the line. The march begins again, the rhythm of metal echoing through the valley. You don't think about how long it's been since you felt warm. You don't think about the weight or the pain or the frost between your skin and the steel. You just move, one step after another, until the noise of the army drowns out the sound of your thoughts. And as the first light spills weakly across the landscape, catching the edge of every helmet, every blade, every frozen curve of iron, you realise there's something oddly beautiful about it. 1,000 tiny suns glinting across a frozen world, all of them cold, none of them burning. Sleep isn't a private act here. It's something that happened in the middle of everything. The sounds of horses breathing, the crackle of dying fires, the muttered prayers of men who have stopped believing but can't stop whispering. You lie down where you can, on ground that's never dry, under a sky that feels too close. There's no boundary between life and death, just thin layers of wool, leather, and exhaustion separating you from both. The horses sleep first. You hear them settle before the men do, the slow shuffle of hooves in the dirt, the creak of leather harnesses loosening. They sigh through their nostrils, deep, heavy, the sound of living bellows pushing warmth into the cold air. That breath smells of hay, sweat, and earth. It rolls through the camp like smoke from an unseen fire. You shift closer to one of them, drawn by the heat radiating from its body. The ground beside the animal is damp, but warmer than anywhere else. You sink into it without thinking, cheek against your arm, feeling the soft tremor of the horse's flank beside you. The men who sleep near the horses always look the most peaceful. The animals don't move much at night, only shifting when the wind rises. Sometimes they stamp or whinny quietly, as if dreaming, You imagine what they might dream of. Open fields, green grass, running without armour or load. You envy them for that freedom. You close your eyes and pretend for a moment that you're somewhere like that too, that the ground beneath you isn't frozen, that the air doesn't sting your throat every time you breathe. The smoke hangs low tonight. The fires have burned down to their last embers, and the air above them is thick, heavy, clinging to the skin. You can taste the soot when you inhale. It sticks to your tongue, coats the inside of your nose. Every breath feels like swallowing the ashes of something sacred. You turn your head and pull your cloak over your face, but it doesn't help. The smoke is everywhere, mixing with the smell of leather, manure, and sweat. It's in your hair, in your blanket, in the creases of your gloves. The whole camp smells like one giant dying fire. The sound of coughing drifts through the dark. Short, wet, constant. You know there's coughs by now. Some of them never stop. They grow weaker until one night they don't return. You've learned not to look when it happens. The men who cough are buried before sunrise, wrapped in their cloaks, laid out near the edges of the camp. There's no ceremony anymore, just a few muttered words, a handful of dirt, and a silence that feels like shame. You've stopped keeping count? When the wind changes, the smell shifts too. You catch a faint sweetness under the smoke, something that doesn't belong. It's the scent of decay. The bodies from the last skirmish still lie out there beyond the rise, frozen where they fell. The priests say their souls are at peace, but you've seen the way the frost collects on their faces, how the birds circle when the sun rises. There's no peace in it. The dead stay near. The night has a way of reminding you of that. Sometimes you wake up and swear you hear them. Footsteps in the dirt, slow and deliberate, moving just beyond the edge of the camp. You tell yourself it's the horses. It always is, until it isn't. Once, you woke to see a figure standing in the fog. Tall, motionless, the shape of a man without detail. You blinked, and it was gone. You didn't mention it to anyone. They would have said it was exhaustion or bad wine. Maybe it was. But sometimes, when the fire burns low, you think about that shape, and wonder if the dead ever really leave these places, or just wait for someone else to join them. The smoke thickens as the night deepens. It moves like a living thing, curling between tents, seeping under cloaks, finding your lungs no matter how you try to avoid it. You breathe through your sleeve and cough quietly. The sound echoes back at you. The air feels heavier now, not just with smoke, but with everything it carries. The stench of damp wool, the sourness of unwashed bodies, the faint iron scent of dried blood. It's a mixture that never changes. You could be anywhere in this land and know by smell alone that it's a Crusader camp. A few men are still awake, talking in low voices near one of the fires. You can't make out the words, just the tone. Tired, resigned, the kind of talk that keeps sleep at bay, because silence feels too close to death. You listen without meaning to. Their voices blur with the creaking of saddles, the shifting of armour, the occasional snort of a horse. Together it makes a rhythm, steady and rough, the pulse of life still clinging to the night. You shift again, pulling the cloak tighter. The edge of the fabric is damp and cold, but your body has stopped caring. You've learned to accept discomfort the way you once accepted prayer, without expectation, only repetition. You think of home again, the smell of straw in a stable, warm and clean, so different from this. You think of the small fire that burned beside it, steady and quiet. You used to watch your father feed it logs and listen to the horses sigh. It was ordinary then. Now it feels like a memory from another life. The horse beside you stirs, one leg shifting, hoof pressing into the dirt. You reach out without thinking and touch its neck. The hide is coarse, warm under your fingers. Steam rises from its breath, catching the faint red light of the coals. You keep your hand there, feeling the steady heartbeat through the skin, until the animal settles again. For a few seconds, you share its rhythm, slow and calm, and it almost feels like warmth. In the distance, you hear a sound like a cry, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the night. It fades quickly, swallowed by the wind. No one moves. No one asks. Out here, noises like that come and go. A wolf, a wounded man, or something else. You learn not to chase the difference. The horses shift uneasily, heads lifting, ears turning. Then they settle again, as if deciding whatever it was doesn't matter anymore. You take their cue and close your eyes. Sleep comes in pieces. You drift for a few minutes at a time, waking with a start when the cold seeps through again. Sometimes you dream. The dreams are short and strange. Flashes of torchlight, familiar faces, the sound of bells. You dream of warmth often, but when you wake, it always feels cruel. The reality is too heavy. You pull the cloak closer and let the dream fade. When you finally open your eyes again, the horizon has started to pale. The smoke looks blue now instead of black. The horses begin to move, stamping and snorting, breath puffing white in the morning air. A trumpet sounds somewhere distant, muffled, as if it too is tired of this routine. You sit up slowly, bones stiff, the world grey and wet. The smell of smoke is still in your mouth. You wipe your face with a gloved hand and feel the grit of ash on your skin. Men begin to rise around you, silent, slow. The camp comes back to life in the same way it dies each night, without ceremony. You watch them roll their blankets, pack their armour, speak only when needed. The fires are out. The smoke drifts away in thin lines, taking the night with it. You stand, legs trembling, and look down at the spot where you slept. There's a shallow depression in the dirt, faint steam rising from it where your body heat met the ground. You cover it with your boot, as though erasing proof you were ever still. The horses are already being saddled. The priests move among the men, offering quiet blessings no one really listens to. You adjust your cloak, fasten your belt, and fall into line. The sun rises weakly behind the clouds, turning the world a dull gold for a few minutes before fading again. You don't look back at the camp. The smoke is gone, the ghosts stay behind, and the horses lead the way forward. The day begins as all of them do, with the memory of warmth fading faster than you can hold it. You start to notice it first in the breathing, the way the man beside you exhales heavier than before, the faint wheeze that lingers between each breath. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing, just the cold. Everyone coughs in the cold, but by morning the sound spreads. All around the camp, the coughing becomes part of the air, deep, rattling, endless. You listen to it rise and fall like wind through broken shutters. It's not just a sound anymore, it's the rhythm of sickness moving through the camp. The nights here do something to the lungs. The air is damp, thick with smoke and frost, filled with whatever the fires can't burn away. You breathe it in, hour after hour, and it settles inside you like sediment at the bottom of a frozen stream. You feel it first as a tightness in your chest, then as pain when you inhale too deeply. The cold makes it worse, locking each breath in place. When you try to cough, it feels like your ribs are trying to crack open. You've seen men try to hide it. They cough into their cloaks, walk slower during the marches, swallow against the taste of iron in their throats. They say nothing because they know what happens to the ones who fall behind. You remember one of them, a soldier from Gascony, always smiling despite the frost. He coughed for a week, laughed it off, said he'd been worse after a bad wine. On the 8th day, he coughed up blood, thick and dark, and by nightfall he was gone. They buried him in the frozen dirt before dawn. No one spoke. There were too many others to worry about. The priests call it a visitation. The sickness of breath, the fever of faith. They tell you it's a test, another trial to be endured. You listen because there's nothing else to do. But in your gut, you know it's just the cold doing its slow, silent work. The air cuts into you every time you draw it in. You can feel it scraping the back of your throat, drying your mouth until even prayer feels like swallowing glass. The nights are worst. When the fire dies, you lie there listening to the coughing rise and fall around you like a wave. You can tell who will last another day and who won't by the sound alone. Sometimes the fever comes first. You wake drenched in sweat even though the air is freezing. The heat feels wrong, like your body is burning itself from the inside out just to fight back against the cold. You pull off your cloak, then pull it back on again, shivering violently. The world tilts when you sit up. The smoke smells thicker than it should. Food tastes like ash. You try to drink water, but it feels heavy going down, like swallowing stones. You tell yourself it's temporary. Everything is temporary here. The healers do what they can. They come through the tents carrying bowls of boiled herbs and flasks of wine diluted with water that's never clean. The mixture smells like rot and mint. You drink it because they tell you to, because faith and obedience are the same thing now. It burns your throat, makes you cough harder, and does nothing to ease the pain. Sometimes they use leeches, sometimes prayers. Neither seem to make a difference. The fever takes who it wants. You remember one night when the wind didn't stop. It howled through the camp like a living thing, pulling at the tents, whistling through the armour hanging on pegs. The cold that came with it felt sharper, cleaner somehow, like new metal. By morning, 6 men were gone. Some froze, some suffocated, some simply never woke. The priest said they were chosen, called to heaven for their devotion. You didn't argue. You just wrapped your cloak tighter and tried not to breathe too deeply. There's a smell that follows the sickness. Sweet, heavy, unmistakable. You can sense it before you even see the bodies. It clings to the air around them, mixing with smoke and sweat. You learn to recognize it and to turn your head away. The others notice it too. They move their blankets farther apart, whisper quietly, avoid touching one another. But no one can truly avoid it. The wind carries it everywhere, through the tents, through the ranks, into every mouth that opens to speak. When your turn comes, it's not dramatic. It starts small, with a cough that doesn't stop, a dull ache that won't leave your ribs. You keep walking, keep working, keep pretending you're fine. But the nights become longer. You wake drenched, your breath coming in shallow gasps. The air around you feels thinner. You can't tell if it's the sickness or the cold that's stealing it. You sit up, pressing a hand to your chest, feeling your heart beat harder than it should. Every breath sounds like it's echoing inside a cave. You think about what the priest said, that this is the trial of the faithful, that endurance is a form of prayer. You try to believe it as you cough into the darkness. The sound barely feels like your own anymore. You listen to it as though it's coming from someone else, someone far away. The ground feels softer tonight, though you know it's just your body giving up its fight against the cold. You lie back and stare at the roof of the tent, the fabric shifting with each gust of wind. You imagine the air outside, the open sky, the stars hidden behind clouds. You wonder if the dead can still feel the wind. Around you, others shift in their sleep, coughing, whispering, muttering half-dreamed words. The horses move restlessly, their breath forming small clouds that hang above them. You focus on that sound, the steady rhythm of life that hasn't left yet. You match your breathing to theirs. Slower, calmer. It helps for a while. The pain fades into a kind of numbness. You can't tell if it's mercy or just another stage of the sickness. In the morning your head feels heavy, full of sand. The world is grey, the air still and flat. Someone shakes your shoulder, asks if you're all right. You nod without answering. Speaking takes too much effort. You pull yourself upright, every movement stiff and deliberate. The cold hits your lungs immediately, sharp and punishing. You cough until your vision blurs, then wipe your mouth with the back of your glove. The smear is dark. You look away quickly before anyone sees. The march begins again. You fall into line, breathing through the pain, counting your steps. The sound of armour clinking becomes a rhythm to follow, a distraction. Every few yards you cough again. No one looks back. Everyone is too busy with their own breathing. You think of stopping, just for a moment, to catch your breath. But stopping here isn't rest. It's the beginning of dying. So you keep moving, one slow, shaking step after another. That night, you sleep apart from the others. Not far, just a few paces beyond the circle of firelight. The cold is worse there, but the quiet is worth it. You lie down on the bare ground, pulling your cloak tight, and close your eyes. The air feels thick again, hard to draw in. You breathe slowly, carefully, as though the night itself might break if you move too quickly. You can hear your heart in your ears, slow and stubborn. The wind picks up again near midnight. It slides through the camp, carrying with it the faint sound of whispers. You tell yourself it's the priests praying. Maybe it is. You close your eyes tighter and try to match the rhythm of their words, slow and steady in and out. The sickness presses down on your chest, heavy and unmoving. You feel it settle there, patient. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just is. Somewhere in the distance, a fire crackles weakly. The smoke drifts toward you, warm for a second before it disappears into the cold. You breathe it in, the smell of ash and life still burning somewhere nearby. You let it fill your lungs until it hurts again. The pain is proof you're still here. For now, that's enough. Food at the end of the day is not a reward. It's a necessity that barely keeps the body moving. You eat because you must, not because you want to. By the time night comes, hunger has dulled into something you barely recognize as an appetite. It's not sharp anymore, just a hollow space inside your stomach that demands to be filled with anything. You sit near the fire, or what's left of it, and wait for the rations to pass around. The smell hits you before the bowl reaches your hands. Smoke, fat, mould and ash mixed together in something that resembles a meal more than it tastes like one. The pot has been cooking all day. It never empties. Whatever doesn't get eaten is left to boil again the next morning. New scraps are added: bones, stale bread, dried peas, or a piece of meat so thin you can see light through it. The men call it pottage, though it's more like survival in liquid form. You scoop out a thick spoonful, steam rising faintly from it, and try not to think about what might be floating inside. The first bite burns your tongue, the second feels cold. You chew slowly, the grit of dirt crunching between your teeth. You tell yourself its flavour. Sometimes the cook and barley, sometimes lentils, sometimes whatever's left from the horse's feed. On good days, someone kills a goat or catches a pigeon, and the camp smells briefly like life again. But those days are rare. Mostly it's the same grey mixture, half burnt, half raw, and always tasting faintly of the iron pot itself. You swallow it anyway. You've learned that warmth matters more than taste. The heat travels down your throat, spreading through your chest, and for a few moments you almost feel human again. The bread is worse. It's hard enough to break a tooth. You have to soak it in the stew before you can bite through. Even then, it tastes like damp wood and smoke. You chew until your jaw aches, trying to soften it, swallowing pieces that scrape your throat on the way down. You think about the bread from home, soft, golden, still warm from the oven. You can still smell it if you try hard enough, but the memory hurts more than hunger, so you push it away. The drink, if there is any, is thin beer or watered wine. It's meant to be safe, boiled before mixing, but most of the time it just tastes sour. You drink it anyway because water alone is too dangerous. The rivers here are full of rot. You've seen what happens to those who drink from them. The stomach cramps, the fevers, the slow, miserable wasting that leaves men too weak to stand. So you swallow the sourness and tell yourself it's good for you. The smell of food draws everyone, even the ones too sick to eat. They sit near the fire, hands out, eyes blank, waiting for the steam to touch their faces. Some take only a few bites before turning away. Others lick the bowl clean. There's no shame in it anymore. Hunger erases pride. You've seen men scrape ashes from the pot when they thought no one was watching. You don't judge them. You've done it yourself. Once, you found a bit of meat that still had colour. It was small, a scrap clinging to a bone. You tore it off with your teeth and chewed slowly, savouring the illusion of strength it brought. A few minutes later, your stomach twisted. You spent the night doubled over in the dark, shivering, the taste of rot thick on your tongue. You learned to eat slower after that. You learned not to trust colour. Spoiled food isn't thrown away. Nothing is. Mould is scraped off. Burnt bits stirred in again. The fire burns hot enough to mask most of the smell. What it doesn't hide, you ignore. The priests say waste is a sin. You agree, though for reasons more practical than holy. Out here, everything is rationed. Food, warmth, breath, even disgust. You only allow yourself what's necessary. Anything else is indulgence. You eat with your gloves off, fingers stiff, nails black with dirt. The bowl is made of wood, cracked and stained from months of use. The spoon you carry is carved from bone. You wipe it clean on your sleeve when you're done. Sometimes the food is so thick you eat with your hands. It clings to your fingers, cools quickly, and leaves a greasy film on your skin that you don't bother washing away. The smell of it follows you to sleep. You can always tell who ate recently. They smell slightly more alive. The noise of the meal is simple. The scrape of spoons, the coughs, The occasional sigh. No one talks much. Words take effort, and everyone knows what the others would say anyway. You listen to the sound of chewing, to the soft crackle of fire, to the faint hiss of rain on canvas. Every sound feels heavy, drawn out like the world itself is tired. The horses get fed last. You watch them chew their oats, calm and slow, while you finish the last of your pottage. Sometimes you envy their patience, their blank acceptance of whatever is given. You wonder if they know hunger the way you do, if they feel it as pain or as emptiness. You decide not to think about it. Thinking about hunger only makes it worse. After the meal, there's nothing to clean. The bowls are wiped with bread or cloth, the pot left to simmer for the next day. You stand and stretch, but the movement makes you dizzy. The blood feels thick in your veins. You can feel your stomach protesting, trying to decide whether to keep what you've eaten or send it back. You pull your cloak tighter and sit again, waiting for the sickness to pass. It never really does. You just get used to it. Later, when the fires die down and the night settles, the real misery begins. The food in your stomach turns heavy, pressing like a stone. The heat from the stew fades, leaving behind a hollow ache that feels worse than before you ate. You roll onto your side, hoping to ease it, but the pain just shifts. You can hear others groaning softly in the dark. You're not alone. Everyone's body is rebelling in quiet unison. Sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night with cramps so sharp they take your breath away. You curl into yourself, gripping your stomach, whispering curses no one hears. The air smells of smoke and human waste. You try to breathe through it, slow and steady, until the pain dulls. When it finally fades, you lie still, afraid to move. Hunger returns soon after. It always does. The body forgets quickly that it was fed, even if what you gave it was closer to punishment than nourishment. You've seen men die from the food here, not from poison, not even from starvation, but from the slow collapse of a body that never got what it needed. Their faces go pale first, eyes sinking, skin taking on the colour of old wax. They still eat, still chew and swallow, but it doesn't matter. The food passes through them without giving anything back. When they fall, it's quiet. No one is surprised. You try not to think about it while you eat. You focus on the heat, the texture, the small moments of relief. A bite that doesn't taste rotten. A mouthful that feels heavier, fuller. You learn to celebrate those tiny victories in silence. They don't mean survival, but they mean one less empty night. Sometimes, if the night isn't too bitter, you share what's left in your bowl with someone else. Not out of kindness, just out of an unspoken rule. Food shared seems to settle easier, maybe because misery divided feels smaller. The man beside you nods, scoops a spoonful, and hands it back. No words are exchanged, none are needed. When you finally lie down, the warmth in your belly fades almost immediately. The cold takes its place, slow and steady. You curl tighter, pressing your hands to your stomach as if to hold the last of the heat inside. The air smells of burnt fat and damp ash. You close your eyes, and the taste of the stew still lingers on your tongue. Sour, salty, metallic. You breathe through it and try to forget. The night stretches on. The hunger begins to return before you've even slept. You can feel it circling, patient and cruel. You know that tomorrow will bring the same pot, the same taste, the same regret, but you'll eat again anyway. You always do. Because in this place, eating isn't living, It's just another way of staying one step ahead of the cold. The first thing you notice in the morning isn't the cold, it's the smell. It hits before you even open your eyes. Sharp, metallic, sour, and thick. It fills your lungs when you breathe, sticks to your tongue, and settles in your hair and clothes. You've smelled it for so long that you've stopped separating it from the air itself. It's the scent of the crusade, wet iron, blood, smoke, and something wholly rotting underneath it all. Your armour carries the strongest trace. You can't wash it, so it's layered with the history of every day before. Sweat, oil, rust, and blood form a kind of second skin. When the rain comes, it mixes everything together and releases a smell that makes your stomach twist. It's not fresh blood anymore, it's old, thick, stale, sweet in a way that turns your mouth dry. You wipe it down with rags when you can, but the odour never leaves. It just sinks deeper into the metal. The ground smells too. The dirt is soaked with years of ash and spilled life. Every step you take stirs it up again. Damp soil mixed with horse dung, sweat, and smoke from endless fires. When the wind shifts, it carries that scent across the camp. It crawls into your tent, into your blanket, into the back of your throat. You've stopped noticing until it's gone, and when that happens, the silence feels wrong. The air without it feels empty. Blood has a sound as well as a smell. You've learned that. You hear it in the clash of battle, in the wet slap of a sword striking flesh, in the cough of a wounded man. But afterward, it's the smell that stays. Even when you scrub your hands with sand and wine, it clings under your nails, inside the creases of your skin. You can smell it hours later while eating, while sleeping. Sometimes you think you can still smell it on people who died days ago. There's a strange moment after every skirmish when the air turns heavy. It's not wind or heat, it's the thick scent of iron rising from the bodies scattered on the ground. It mixes with the dust, becomes something you breathe without realizing. You tell yourself it's the scent of victory, but it never feels that way. It feels old, like something left behind from the beginning of the world. The horses bleed too. When one falls, the smell is worse than anything human. It's warmer, heavier. You can smell the life leaving its body before it even stops moving. The men don't speak during that. They just watch, faces pale, waiting for the sound to stop. Then someone cuts the saddle free, wipes the blade on the ground, and walks away. The air lingers thick and wet for hours afterward. The fires don't help. They burn everything you can find. Wood, cloth, sometimes what's left of a destroyed wagon or a fallen tent. The smoke adds another layer to the air, thick and oily. It hides the smell for a while, then makes it worse. When it rains, all of it runs together. The blood, the dirt, the ashes, forming puddles that stain your boots red-brown. You tell yourself it's mud. You stop looking too closely. The priests move through the aftermath, carrying incense, swinging their censers in slow, careful arcs. The smoke they release is meant to purify, to drive away the stench of death. You watch the grey trails curl through the air, mixing with the black smoke from the fires. The scents collide. Sweet resin, burnt flesh, cold iron, until you can't tell where holiness ends and corruption begins. The smell of God, they call it. You don't argue. It's the only perfume this land has left. You kneel when they pray, the smoke stinging your eyes, and for a moment the sweetness cuts through everything else. You inhale deeply, trying to memorize that brief relief. It fades too fast. Beneath it, The iron smell remains, stubborn and real. You start to wonder if that's what faith is. Something faint and temporary layered over a truth that never changes. The blood stains never wash out completely. On your hands, your armour, your cloak. You try scraping them off with your knife, but the rust from the blade just adds another mark. The stains turn darker over time, blending into the fabric until they become part of it. You've stopped thinking of them as filth. They're just texture now, part of the world. You wear them the way you wear the cross round your neck. Without pride, without shame, simply because there's no other choice. At night, when the air cools and the fires die, the smell grows stronger again. The wind pushes it through the tents like a reminder. Some men cover their faces with cloth, others burn herbs, but it doesn't matter. The scent seeps through everything. You lie there breathing it in, eyes half open, the taste of iron still on your tongue. It's the last thing you smell before you fall asleep, and the first thing that greets you when you wake. Once, during a brief peace, the rain washed everything clean. The air after felt new. You remember standing in it, eyes closed, just breathing. For the first time in months, there was nothing. No smoke, no iron, no blood. Only the faint scent of wet grass. It lasted less than an hour. Then the wind changed and the smell returned, heavier than before. You realised then that it would never truly go away. The land itself had absorbed it. Sometimes when the priests preach, they talk about the smell of sin, invisible, eternal, impossible to wash away. You think of that when you smell the iron on your hands. Maybe that's what they mean. Maybe the scent that follows you isn't from the blood of others, but from your own soul, burning quietly, unnoticed. You shake the thought away. Faith and filth have become the same thing here. You turn the cross in your hand, feeling the cold metal against your skin. It smells faintly of rust now, like everything else you carry. You breathe against it, hoping your warmth will drive away the cold. But even it smells like iron. You wonder if God notices, if heaven has a scent like this. Smoke, sweat, and sacrifice. You decide not to think about it. Thinking makes it harder to sleep. When the wind shifts again, the smell drifts south, down toward the valley, where the next battle will be. You know that when you get there, it'll already be waiting. The same scent, the same weight in the air, as if the land itself exhales it forever. You close your eyes and let the smell surround you. It's the only thing that feels constant anymore. A presence, a reminder, a God made of iron and ash. Sleep never really feels like rest anymore. It's just another kind of waiting, softer than death, quieter than prayer. You close your eyes because there's nothing else to do, not because you expect peace. The ground is cold against your back, your cloak stiff, your body sore from the march. You can still feel the weight of your armour, even after you've taken it off. It's in your shoulders, in your hands, in the muscles of your neck that no longer remember what it's like to relax. The night presses in heavy and slow. The wind slides throughout the camp like a whisper that never stops. You pull your hood lower, but the cold finds its way through anyway, settling into the cracks of your body like water freezing inside stone. You breathe through it, eyes half open, watching the faint shimmer of snow drift through the air. It's too light to cover anything, too cold to melt. It lands on your face, tiny and sharp, then disappears. You fall asleep without realizing it. The dreams come fast, they always do now. The first ones are harmless, memories that slip through the cracks. The smell of bread baking somewhere far away. The sound of a church bell ringing at dawn. A voice calling your name, the way only someone who loves you could. Then the dream shifts. It always does. The warmth fades, replaced by a red light that flickers and grows until you recognize it as fire. Not from a hearth, but from the field. The flames move across your mind like a tide, carrying screams that turn to silence before you can wake. When you do open your eyes, you're not sure if you're still dreaming. The fire from another tent has gone out, leaving only a column of smoke curling into the darkness. You stare at it, watching how it twists and then vanishes. The silence around you is so complete that the smallest sounds become enormous. The creak of leather, the clink of a buckle, the faint ring of steel as someone shifts their sword in their sleep. It's a music you know too well. You hear it in your dreams now, always the same rhythm, metal against metal, the low hum of breathing beneath it, and then the sudden break when the sound becomes pain. You close your eyes again, but the mind doesn't let go so easily. The snow in the dream keeps falling, heavier now, covering everything in white until only the bodies remain visible, half buried, frozen mid-motion. You recognize the faces even though you shouldn't. The dead look like living here. Their eyes stay open, their mouths move as if whispering prayers. You reach for one and feel the cold sink into your hand like it's entering your blood. You pull back, but it's already there. You wake with your hand numb, fingers stiff, the real snow falling through the hole in the tent above you. You sit up slowly, heart beating too fast, breath fogging in front of your face. The camp is still. A few fires burn low, their light weak and distant. You listen for the familiar sounds of men shifting in their sleep, horses stirring, the wind moving through the lines. Everything sounds slower than it should, like the world itself is holding its breath. You run your hand through your hair and feel frost where sweat should be. You wipe it off, but it returns almost instantly. The night has turned colder again. Dreams here don't belong to you. They belong to the place, to the land, the air, the things you've done. You've stopped believing they mean anything, but they still come. And when they do, they feel like judgment. The priests say dreams are messages from heaven, visions sent to strengthen faith. You're not sure. Most of yours don't feel like messages. They feel like memories you were never supposed to keep. Sometimes you dream of the faces of the men you've killed, not the ones who fell quickly, but the ones who didn't. Their eyes stay with you. They follow you through the dream, unblinking, as if waiting for you to explain why. You never do. You wake up shaking, whispering a prayer you don't finish. The words lose their shape halfway through. You roll over, close your eyes, and pretend you were never awake. There's a kind of guilt that grows quietly here. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces. A look, a sound, the way blood steams on snow before it freezes. You tell yourself it's duty. You tell yourself it's holy work. But in the quiet hours before dawn, when your breath is the only thing you can hear, you start to wonder. The priests say sin can be washed away through confession, but the rivers here are full of filth. You stopped believing in clean water months ago. The snow keeps falling. You watch it collect along the edge of your blanket, each flake catching the faint orange light from the fire. The world feels smaller when it snows, as if the sky and the ground have decided to meet in the middle and trap everything in between. You can hear it landing, soft and constant. It muffles the camp until all that's left is breath and heartbeat. You close your eyes again, hoping this time the dream will be empty. It never is. Or you drift in and out, caught between sleep and waking. The sound of steel follows you there too, faint, distant, never quite gone. You can't tell if it's memory or imagination. It echoes through the cold, clean and sharp, and each time it hits, you flinch without meaning to. You see flashes behind your eyelids, swords swinging, sparks bursting, armour splitting. The rhythm repeats until it becomes a lullaby, brutal but familiar. You dream of home sometimes, but even there the sound finds you. You stand in the doorway of a warm room, and outside you can hear the clang of metal on metal, steady as a heartbeat. You know it's not real, but the comfort of the room fades each time you hear it. You wake again, back in the tent, the cold returning like a tide. The dream leaves its echo behind, a ringing in your ears, a memory of weight, the smell of smoke. Sin isn't a word you think about anymore, but it lingers at the edge of everything. The priests say every act of killing stains the soul unless it's done in God's name. You've said his name before every battle, but it doesn't sound the same now. You still pray, though sometimes the words taste like rust. Maybe that's what sin really is here. The taste of iron that never leaves your mouth. The snow stops just before dawn. You can feel the change before you see it. The air grows heavier, the silence deeper. You sit up, pulling the cloak around your shoulders, and stare at the thin grey light spreading across the horizon. The camp begins to stir. The coughs, the clatter of metal, the groans of men trying to wake their frozen limbs. You look down at the ground beside you. The snow there is streaked with red, where someone bled in their sleep. You don't know who, you don't ask. You stand slowly, every muscle stiff. Your legs ache, your back feels carved from wood. You stretch until your armour creaks. The sound of steel again, real this time, clean and bright in the cold air. You reach for your sword, check the edge, wipe it with your sleeve. The metal is so cold it burns your fingers. You look at it and see your reflection warped in the blade, pale, hollow-eyed, older than you should be. You slide it back into its sheath and breathe through the sting in your chest. The air cuts deep, but at least it's honest. The light grows stronger. The snow begins to melt, turning to water that soaks into the dirt. The smell of iron rises again, thick and familiar. You tighten your belt, pull your cloak close, and step into the morning. The wind catches the edge of the camp, carrying the faint sound of steel clashing somewhere far off. Another fight, another prayer, another dream waiting to begin again. There are nights when the cold comes from inside. It begins somewhere beneath the ribs, a quiet ache that no fire can touch. It's not the kind that stiffens your hands or bites at your skin. It's slower, heavier. It settles deeper with each breath. You feel it while sitting alone, away from the fires, your body still but your thoughts restless. The wind moves softly across the camp, but you barely notice. The air outside and the silence within start to feel like the same thing. You've spent enough nights here to understand that faith changes in the dark. The prayers sound different when your lips tremble. The words you once knew by heart don't always come out in the right order. Sometimes you stop halfway through a sentence, not because you've forgotten it, but because you don't know if it still means what it used to. You whisper the rest anyway, hoping the effort counts for something. The priests walk among the tents at night, their torches flickering, their voices low. You hear their murmurs long before you see them. They offer blessings, forgiveness, the chance to unburden your soul before sleep. Some men go to them willingly, kneel in the mud, confess things that no one will remember by morning. You've done it too. You remember kneeling once, your knees pressing into the frozen ground, your hands clasped so tightly that your knuckles turned white. The priest's breath had smelled of smoke and wine. His eyes were hollow from the same cold that lives in everyone now. You told him everything you could remember, the things you'd done, the things you hadn't stopped. He nodded slowly, muttered the words of absolution, and pressed a hand to your head. The warmth of his palm was the only part that felt real. When you stood, nothing felt different. The guilt stayed. It never really goes anywhere. It just settles deeper, like water freezing into stone. You told yourself it was because faith takes time, that forgiveness doesn't arrive in a moment. But the truth, if you allow yourself to think it, is simpler. The sins you've confessed still feel too human to be washed away. You've killed, yes. You've taken, yes. But there are smaller things, quieter ones, that weigh more than any battle ever did. You think about the faces of the people who lived in the villages you passed, the way they stared as your army marched through, their eyes wide and hollow, their hands clinging to door frames. You tell yourself they were unbelievers, that taking what you needed was just survival. But when the memory returns, it always brings the same detail. A child standing barefoot in the mud, watching as you rode past. You hadn't looked back. You try not to now, even in memory. The priests say God forgives all sins confessed with true repentance. But how do you know when repentance is true? You've said the words, felt the weight of them in your mouth. But sometimes you wonder if that's just another habit now, a ritual like sharpening a blade or mending a strap. Something you do because not doing it feels dangerous. The men talk about guilt in their own way. They call it weakness, or worse, superstition. Some say it's the devil's trick, meant to slow a man's sword. Others say it's just the mark of living too long. You listen to them and say nothing. You've seen what happens to men who stop feeling guilty. They move through the world like shadows, efficient, quiet, untouched. You envy them, but you don't trust them. A man without guilt is colder than the steel he carries. When the night is quiet and the fires are down to ash, that's when the thoughts return strongest. You lie there under your cloak, eyes open, staring into nothing. You start counting breaths to keep your mind still, but it doesn't work. The faces come back, the screams too. They always do, but not in sound, more like the echo of sound, faint and heavy in the chest. You press your palms over your ears, but that only makes the pulse louder. You whisper a prayer again, not for forgiveness this time, but for silence. There's a part of you that misses the certainty you once had. Back home, faith was simple. You prayed, you worked, you believed. Here belief feels like frost. It covers everything but brings no warmth. You can see it, touch it, but it doesn't comfort you. You wonder if that's what doubt really is. Not disbelief, but the realization that believing doesn't change the cold. You sometimes walk beyond the fires before sleep, far enough that the sound of the camp fades. The stars look close enough to touch, pale and flickering through the frost. You speak to them like they're listening, though you know they aren't. You tell them you're tired, that you've done your best, that you're still trying to believe. The words vanish into the dark air, leaving no echo, but saying them helps. It feels like confessing to the world itself, one that doesn't forgive, but at least doesn't judge. You remember the priest who told you once that doubt is proof of faith, that only those who believe truly can feel its absence. You wanted to believe him then, and maybe you still do. But now, when doubt comes, it feels less like absence, and more like a companion. It sits beside you while you eat, walks with you while you march, lies down beside you at night. It doesn't leave, but it doesn't speak either. You start to understand why some men name it God's silence. When the others sleep, you hear their dreams before they wake. Murmurs, gasps, sometimes laughter that turns to sobbing. You wonder if they're confessing too, in their own way, without knowing it. The wind moves through the camp again, lifting bits of ash from the dying fires. And you think of how small everything feels here. Each man his own secret. Each secret carried by the same cold air. You still make the sign of the cross before sleep. Habit, maybe, or fear. The motion is quick, almost invisible, your fingers trembling. You don't expect grace anymore, but you still make the gesture. It feels like anchoring yourself to something solid, even if it's only memory. You whisper a few words under your breath. Not a prayer this time, not exactly. More like a conversation with someone who isn't there. You tell them that the guilt has grown quiet now, that it no longer hurts, that it just sits there, calm and cold, like another organ inside your body. The wind shifts again, colder, sharper. It moves through the tent, lifting the edge of your blanket. You reach for it, pull it down, and lie still. Somewhere in the camp, a man coughs in his sleep. Another mutters something that sounds like a name. You close your eyes and listen to it all. The breathing, the wind, the soft rattle of armour. The sounds of living that never quite let you forget the dead. The cold in your chest doesn't leave, but you stop fighting it. You let it stay. You breathe around it. You tell yourself it's just part of being here, that maybe everyone carries the same frost now, invisible but shared. You drift towards sleep, the words of confession fading with the last flicker of firelight. You never hear the priest's voice again in your dreams. Only the wind, the whisper of fabric, and the steady sound of your own breath. There's a moment every morning when you can tell the sun is about to rise, not because you see it, but because the cold changes. It sharpens for a few breaths, as if the night is tightening its grip before letting go. The air turns brittle, every exhale forming a cloud that hangs longer than it should. You feel it on your skin before your eyes open, that thin, merciless shift that means another day is coming whether you want it or not. You lie there for a while, eyes half open, the frost from your breath gathering on your beard, on the edge of your blanket, on the inside of your helmet where you left it by your head. The fire went out hours ago. The ashes look grey and lifeless, and you can see where someone tried to relight it in the night, leaving behind a few half-burned twigs and the mark of a hand pressed into the soot. You stare at it, thinking about how much effort went into that single attempt for warmth that didn't last. The camp starts to move slowly. First, the coughing. It's always the coughing. Then the shuffle of boots, the low muttering of men trying to wake their bodies. The sound spreads like the rustle of leaves before a storm. No one speaks loudly. Morning isn't a time for words, it's a time for proving that you're still able to stand. You sit up, your joints cracking like ice breaking in a frozen stream. The motion makes your stomach turn, but you breathe through it and pull the cloak tighter around your shoulders. The fabric feels heavier today, stiff with frost and sweat. The light comes slowly. A thin, pale ribbon stretches across the horizon, not gold or warm, just grey and distant. You blink against it, your eyes stinging from the cold air. The ground around you sparkles faintly, a cruel beauty that disappears the moment the sun touches it. You look at the others and see the same expression on every face, exhaustion disguised as routine. They move in slow, deliberate motions, packing what little they have, strapping on armour that feels heavier than it did the day before. The bodies from the night are still where they fell. No one has moved them yet. The frost makes them look peaceful, their faces smooth, their hands folded where they froze. You try not to look, but it's impossible not to notice how many there are now. Each morning there are more. Men who went to sleep breathing quietly and never woke. No cries, no struggle. Just silence. The cold is efficient that way. You wonder if they felt it happening, or if the night took them gently. You hope it was gentle. 2 men carry one of the bodies past you, wrapped in a torn cloak. The legs drag behind them, boots scraping the dirt. They don't look at what they're carrying. They just move toward the shallow trench at the edge of camp where the others lie. You watch the steam rise from their mouths as they breathe, the only sign that they're still alive. You want to help, but your body doesn't respond. You sit and watch until they disappear from view, then lower your head. You know your turn will come if you stop moving long enough. Someone calls your name. You look up and see one of the younger soldiers holding a cup of water. His hands shake, and you can see how red his fingers have become. You take it from him without a word and sip. The water tastes like smoke and dirt. It's lukewarm, probably from sitting near the embers overnight, but it feels almost pleasant against your cracked lips. You hand the cup back and nod once. He nods too. A silent exchange of acknowledgement that you're both still here. The priests begin their morning prayers near the centre of the camp. The sound drifts faintly through the air, low voices chanting in rhythm, the words indistinct but steady. You listen without moving. The chant always starts the same way, asking for strength, for mercy, for endurance. You don't join in anymore. You've said those words too many times to believe they change anything. Still, hearing them helps. It makes the morning feel less empty, as if someone somewhere is still trying to hold the world together. The sun finally breaks over the hills. It's a weak light, filtered through mist, but it turns the frost into a mirror. For a few minutes, everything glows. The tents, the helmets, even the ground. It's beautiful in a way that feels cruel, like the world is mocking you with reminders of what beauty used to mean. You squint against it, not because it's bright, but because it hurts to look at something that doesn't match the feeling inside your chest. Men begin to move toward the horses. The animals snort and stamp, their breath rising in thick clouds. You hear the creak of saddles, the jingle of bridles. Someone curses softly as a strap breaks. Another laughs, the sound brief and hollow. You stand slowly, legs trembling from stiffness, and begin fastening your own gear. The metal bites against your skin as you pull it on. You wince, then steady yourself. Every piece feels like part of the same punishment you've been wearing for months. A gust of wind sweeps through the camp, lifting the edge of your cloak and scattering the ashes from a nearby fire. The smoke smells faintly of wet wood and meat. It mixes with the cold until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You look toward the hills in the distance, where the light seems to be gathering, and for a moment you think you see movement. Figures against the pale sky. You blink, but they're gone. You tell yourself it's the wind playing tricks again. The march will start soon. It always does, no matter how tired, how broken, how many are missing. The horn will sound, and the line will form, and the world will move forward whether you're ready or not. You take a deep breath, feeling the air scrape your throat. You cough once, then again, the sound tearing through the silence. A few men glance your way, then look away just as quickly. Everyone is listening for signs of weakness now. You swallow hard and pull your scarf higher over your face. The light is stronger now, but it doesn't bring warmth. It just exposes everything. The faces, the fatigue, the truth that no one here expects comfort anymore. You glance down at the ground and see your reflection faintly in a puddle. The water ripples with each breath of wind, distorting your features until they look like someone else's. You touch the surface with your glove, and the cold shocks you back into yourself. Someone shouts an order. The sound cuts through the camp, sharp and final. You tighten the strap on your belt, adjust your cloak, and fall into line with the others. The ground crunches underfoot as the column begins to move. You glance once more toward the horizon, the pale light stretching thin across the valley, and you think about how the night never really leaves this place. It just hides behind the daylight for a while. The bodies at the edge of the camp are already half buried by frost. No one looks back. You don't either. The day has begun, and the only thing that matters is the next step. The dawn came too soon, as it always does, and the world demands movement from the living before they remember how to stop. The road doesn't end. It only changes shape. Some days it's dust. Other days it's mud, thick and clinging, pulling at your boots with every step. Sometimes it's frozen solid, the ground cracking beneath you like glass under pressure. You've walked on all of it, through it, over it, until the earth itself feels like part of your body. The rhythm of walking has become your heartbeat. You don't think about direction anymore. Forward is the only word that matters. You wake before the sun, because the march never waits. The air is thin and sharp, the kind that cuts your lungs when you breathe too quickly. You stretch your hands inside your gloves and feel nothing. The fingers are stiff, unresponsive, the colour of candle wax. You slap them against your thigh until the ache returns. Pain is proof that you're still here. You stand, joints popping, legs heavy, and join the others as they gather in lines that no longer resemble soldiers so much as shadows moving together out of habit. The sound of movement fills the world. Boots grinding against dirt, armour creaking, chains clinking, the slow exhale of horses as they shift under their loads. The noise blurs into a single tone, constant, unbroken, hypnotic. You stop hearing it after a while. It becomes the air itself, a hum that fills your head and keeps you moving when thought would make you stop. You march until the sky changes colour. Morning fades into noon without you noticing. The sun, when it appears, is white and distant, offering no heat. You keep your eyes on the ground, because looking up takes effort. The horizon never gets closer anyway. The landscape repeats. Hills, valleys, stones, ruins. You've seen them all before, or maybe you haven't. It doesn't matter. Each place feels like the echo of the last. The men around you rarely speak anymore. Words waste breath. The ones who still talk do it quietly, half to themselves, half to no one. Sometimes you hear fragments, a memory of home, a curse, a prayer whispered so faintly that the wind swallows it before it reaches you. You stop listening after a while. Their voices make you think too much. Silence is easier. It leaves room only for the sound of steps, one after another, endless. When someone falls, the line bends around them. No one stops unless ordered. The fallen lie where they drop, clutching their chest or their stomach, eyes wide with confusion that quickly fades into stillness. You learn not to look too long. Looking makes you think about how easy it is to join them. The cold doesn't kill suddenly. It sneaks in, slow and patient, turning exhaustion into surrender. You keep your eyes forward and tell yourself that each step is one less to take tomorrow. You don't know if that's true, but it helps. By evening, your legs feel hollow. The world narrows to the space between your boots. You count steps sometimes, though you always lose track. The repetition blurs your thoughts until you stop remembering why you started counting in the first place. The body moves because it has learned to move, like a machine that's forgotten what it was built for. You wonder if faith works the same way, something that keeps going simply because it doesn't know how to stop. When the horn sounds for rest, it doesn't feel like a relief. It feels like confusion. The sudden stillness makes your body sway. You stop walking, but still feel the rhythm under your skin. Your muscles twitching in time with footsteps that no longer exist. You unfasten your cloak, sit slowly, and stare at the dirt. The ground is littered with frost, footprints, bits of straw, drops of melted snow that catch the last of the fading light. You press your hand into it, feeling the cold sink through the glove. It's real in a way that nothing else is. The camp forms itself without orders now. Men move automatically, setting down packs, lighting fires that barely burn, feeding the horses, tending to wounds. You help where you can, but mostly you just watch. The sky darkens fast, and the air grows heavier. You pull your cloak around you and lie down, your body already trembling from the day. The smell of smoke returns, the taste of iron still in your mouth. You breathe it in because it's the only thing left to fill your lungs. Sleep doesn't come easily after a march. The muscles refuse to release their tension. Your legs twitch even when you lie still, like they're still trying to walk. You close your eyes anyway. The fire crackles softly nearby. Someone snores. Someone else mutters a prayer that fades before it ends. You turn onto your side, your cheek pressed against the dirt, and stare at the faint glow of the coals. The warmth reaches your face, but not your body. You don't care. The body has stopped asking for comfort. It just asks to stop. Your mind drifts to strange places when you're this tired. You think of home again, but it's never the way it was. The memory changes each time, becoming less real, more dream than truth. The faces blur. The streets twist into shapes that don't exist. Even the warmth of the old fire feels wrong now. Too bright, too soft. You can't picture yourself there anymore. The you that belonged to that world doesn't exist here. The man you've become wouldn't fit inside that memory. You breathe slowly, the cold slipping between each inhale. The air tastes of ash. The stars above are faint, small holes in a black cloth sky. You watch them until your vision blurs. You think about what the priest said, that each hardship endured brings you closer to salvation. You try to believe it. Maybe this march, this endless rhythm of pain and cold, is a kind of prayer. Maybe sleep itself, when it finally comes, is an act of faith. Surrendering to something unseen and trusting you'll wake again. The wind picks up. It moves through the camp like a voice whispering secrets in a language you almost understand. You pull the cloak tighter and shut your eyes. The shivering slows. The ache in your limbs fades into something softer, distant. You can feel yourself slipping toward that thin edge between exhaustion and oblivion. The moment before sleep has become sacred in its own way. Not peaceful, not kind, but honest. The last thought that passes through your mind isn't about home or glory or faith. It's about warmth. You wonder if heaven feels warm. Not bright, not golden, just warm. You hold on to that thought as the dark folds around you. The sound of the camp fades, replaced by the rhythm that has followed you for months. Boots on dirt, armour shifting, wind through banners. The march continues, even in dreams. You follow it because there's nothing else left to do. You sleep because your body demands it, because belief and exhaustion have become the same thing. You sleep because not sleeping would mean stopping, and stopping means dying. The march goes on, and so do you, carried forward by faith that no longer needs understanding, only motion. The ground beneath you hums with the memory of all the steps that came before, and the air above you holds the promise of more to come. You drift between both, neither awake nor gone, part of the endless movement that keeps the living from turning still. The night deepens, the fires dim, and the cold settles over everything again. But for a few quiet hours, before dawn comes too soon once more, you find what passes for peace in this world. Not warmth, not safety, but the stillness of a man who has finally stopped moving, if only in his mind. You sleep because you have to. You sleep because in this place, it's the last act of faith you still know how to perform.